Welcome, Whit Walters, Field CTO at GigaOM. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you, Bonnie. It's good to be back with you.
Yeah, and the last time we talked, we were talking about the GigaOM Sonar report. And today we're really going to be digging into the CXO Decision Brief that you just released. So why don't we just kick it off by, sharing a little bit about this report and maybe the methodology behind what it took to create this?
Sure. So when we do a radar, or in our case, we did a sonar, the sonar is really kind of designed for the technical implementation. We take a look at the technology and where the GigaOM radar and sonar reports are really written by technologists for technologists. So where we differentiate in this space is we actually have practitioners who've done these things, who've used them, who've built them out, and really work with the technology. And they've been hands on keyboards somewhere along the way. When we build the CXO brief, we take it from a different aspect. We take it from the chief technology officer having to be able to explain it to his CEO, CFO, the board of directors in terms of why do we need this thing and where do we go? So our process begins by kind of analyzing the trend. We take a look at this case towards the market shift towards real-time AI-driven applications and the pressure this puts on kind of existing data platforms. From there, we do a deep dive analysis to give leaders the information they need to drive the strategy, not just the technology, but the strategy behind it. When we look at this, we really kind of try to be as objective as possible. And you guys commissioned the brief and you gave us some great documentation, like some of the benchmarks that you did. We take those benchmarks and we read them, and it was 100 pages. So it was some pretty good reading, and I enjoyed a couple of nice afternoons out in the sunshine being able to read those. But we couldn't use those numbers because we didn't create it. So we want to be as objective as possible. I'm now acknowledging that you guys had a really great case study and a really good benchmark showing that your numbers were just phenomenal in terms of what you're able to do. But we didn't put that into the CXO brief. We actually talked about some of the things that we could control, like total cost of ownership and being able to understand that. What kind of organizational impact does Vespa have on an organization? Why do you need it? What's it going to do? What kind of impact is it going to have both for your technology, your people, your processes, all the things that you're doing? And then finally, some investment needs for some of the specialized skills, because again, your team is going to have to upskill to be able to implement it and learn a whole new technology stack. Now, it's a short learning curve, but again, everything is a learning curve. And so this gives us kind of that full unvarnished picture of what it's like to adopt a platform. And then to stay objective, we also have then a fact checking process. And so with then that unvarnished view, we try to build then out a set of trust. What GigaOM is trying to do is create trust so that when an executive reads this, they say, oh, this was written by somebody who's been an executive. They understand my point of view. That point of view in a CXO brief is different again from the radar and sonar. And so when you take these two together, you're really giving then a full view across an enterprise, both from an executive standpoint and then from the technical standpoint, to make sure that we give you then that set of trust, those right talking points, and how do we talk about Vespa in the organization.
Yeah, and I do like that it does kind of bridge that gap between the technical and business side of things. And having that objective perspective really does help the buyers when they're kind of considering solutions, because anyone can kind of say anything, but the process that you follow to keep that objectivity is really really important. Now, you did mention that you started the brief by framing this new wave of demands on digital businesses. Why do you think that this shift toward real-time AI applications is creating such pressure on existing search architectures?
So it comes down to that seismic shift in user expectations. We've grown up in a world of Google and quick answers, quick responses to the information queries that we need. But we've moved kind of beyond simple speed, like just not just how fast it is in getting that response, to what are kind of some of the ways that we're looking at getting information back. And so consumers are now calibrated kind of by looking at some of these new generation of AI services, the demand for sub-second personalization, not just the answers that they're looking for. Just give me the keywords, but they're looking for context aware. So what do you know about me? What do you know about my preferences? And can you give me answers that kind of fit what I'm looking for and not just fit keywords? So consumers are now looking for calibrated AI generated answers. So you get sub-second personalization, you get context aware recommendations. You don't just get, give me the matches for all these keywords that I'm looking for. I'm looking for answers that give me more and better information that's connected to me or my preferences. So this new standard presents a critical challenge for modern digital businesses. Their applications are now processing massive amounts of volumes of data, and you're looking for instant returns back on that are delivering precise and relevant results. And so this isn't just an incremental change, it's a fundamental architectural change that is kind of a crisis point for a lot of the existing digital architecture that's out there now that was based on semantic search. Word, match these words, match these things. Now I'm looking for context. Give me the right context, give me the right information. And it's a little more fuzzy than it was before. And we've created some really good algorithms inside some of these search engines that are really giving us better answers and more relevant answers. And so this is really kind of then that fundamental sea change of why Vespa, why now, especially with the rise in AI algorithms that are looking at giving better answers. And then how do we support those AI algorithms that aren't just using semantic search? They're using vector search. They're using other search engines that give better answers more quickly and are giving then informed consumers who are used to getting these kinds of information. How do we manage that? And in case in point, Perplexity. Perplexity is running on Vespa. And so to be able to support Perplexity in all the different queries that you run, in fact, it's now my go-to search engine, kind of use it more than Google because I get better answers. I get a higher quality data set that I'm getting back. And so that's really what we see is driving the technology and kind of the sea change that we're seeing now in the industry.
Yeah, and I like what you said about going from matching to now being more context aware. And so I kind of see it as you need to do more than just get the right answers, but you need to get the right context. And getting the right context is really what happens in those systems. Now, with those traditional platforms, those Lucene-based engines, for example, why do you think they've struggled to keep up with the AI-driven workloads? And I mean, is that something that you're seeing?
Oh, absolutely. So years ago, I built a search engine using Lucene and Solar. It was great. We used like a catalog type search and we used faceted search. But again, you were building on top of something that was built 20, 25 years ago for a specific technology set. So we were architecting for a different era back then. And when you're looking for catalog, I'm looking for maybe shoes. Now I can say, give me a pair of minimalist running shoes designed for mountain trails, right? I live in Colorado. That's kind of my thing. Maybe you couldn't find that easily or quickly. Now I'm getting a better answer in terms of that. So those workloads were kind of sparse, keyword based information retrieval. Their design was brilliant. It was very efficient for sparse data. Now with modern workloads, especially with AI applications, it's fundamentally different. We're relying on a very dense vector operations for semantic understanding. You're trying to understand what I'm asking for, as opposed to just matching the keywords that are in it and what things match it. And sometimes you may get that, sometimes you don't. So this architectural mismatch of Lucene was great for these tasks, great for AI search. And so it's not just a technical implementation now. And it's not just the difference in the technology, it's a difference in how it impacts the business and being able to find things and being able to give more relevant information by using vector search, vector database with all of this information really does that. So you've got the other problem with that is Lucene, because it was designed kind of around the Hadoop ecosystem. I've got all this different data. I've got lots of different servers and I'm using some older technology. And so I've also got a larger server farm and a larger server footprint. And this also created some performance bottlenecks and it accumulated my technical debt. So it created a lot of organizational friction that then also increased not only the footprint of the servers, but increased my costs, increased that tangible slowdown in innovation. And by using something like Vespa and a better, faster search database designed for AI, now I'm decreasing my footprint and decreasing a lot of the technical debt because these older systems, again, 20 years old, weren't really designed for where we're going kind of in a modern world, modern being AI driven, LLMs everywhere. asking a lot of questions and being able to do kind of things like retrieval augmented generation and giving me more context aware data. Solar and Lucene and those great technologies, even something like Elasticsearch can't really keep up with the modern workloads that we're trying to put on top.
Yeah, and one of the things I think is a big difference is Vespa was built for real-time data, and that's something that's called out in this report as well is Vespa's ability to unify real-time data and AI compute. Can you unpack what that means to you and why that would be significant?
Sure. So AI compute, this is kind of a new thing. So back in the before times when IBM came out with relational databases and Oracle and SQL Server really kind of owned that space, we had data and compute in the same box. Then we came up with Hadoop and some of those ecosystems that allowed us to put data anywhere and then put compute somewhere else. And it really freed us up to have huge amounts of data that we could put and be able to search and be able to retrieve and pull that through. But it was kind of slow. Didn't matter, but it still gave us the right answers. Now, with Vespa and its architecture, we're starting to bring compute and data back together again across your vast ecosystem of data. So, as that business outcome and some of those pain points start to come along, we're kind of figuring out where those parts were. How do we get there? How do we get there faster? And how do we get better answers using some of the Vespa architecture and technology to really kind of drive business outcomes? So that really gives us kind of then that right feel for the right technology at the right time and allows us again to keep scaling with the data, but to kind of also start to compact it back down again and be able to retrieve things much more quickly instead of having to send it to a central server like an Elasticsearch or in Lucene, and then be able to scan across billions or trillions of records. Now we're looking at, hey, where's the data stored? How can I get to it faster? How can I process it much more quickly using the right algorithms and techniques?
Obviously, that's really important for use cases like Perplexity, and the report also brings in examples like Vinted. So, what lessons or patterns did you observe across these case studies that might apply more broadly to other companies?
Sure. So with Perplexity, I'm asking a question, I'm bringing things in, I'm asking deep, deep questions. And I'm also looking at billions of queries a day now. We're starting to see hundreds of millions of users. SAP, I was just at SAP's Sapphire, and SAP announced a partnership with Perplexity. Now, SAP brought out their own kind of coding engine and an AI that's trained on SAP data. Great. It's exactly what I need. I need those German acronyms kind of trained in the data. I need that AI trained in the business processes that SAP has done a great job with. What if I have a question that's outside of SAP? Some other things. So if I'm looking at, hey, I'm looking at my supply chain analytics, but tell me about some of the weather coming up. What's in the news lately? Topical. We know that there are going to be some supply chain disruptions potentially coming through. We've seen that over the last couple of years of COVID and some of the things that we're also seeing geopolitically going on right now. And tell me about that. That data is not necessarily stored in SAP, but now I can start to ask questions and keep that context, and it'll share it between SAP and Perplexity. And now I'm getting the answers I need. For Vinted, that's a really cool use case because that's Europe's largest secondary market kind of used clothing marketplace. And so if I'm looking for kind of dating myself, but if I'm looking for a Brooks Brothers blue blazer with regimental buttons on it, help me find that. Where can I find that? Can I find something similar? And again, some of those things in those case studies really show that I can now do faster, better searching with contextually aware answers. Those catalog searches that I used to do in Solar and Lucene and get pretty close and give you a lot of information to sort through, now I can really narrow down those searches. So if I'm looking at starting a company and I've got an AI aware catalog or AI aware set of information that I'm returning to my end users, I can then really easily do retrieval augmented generation and I can plug it into my use case and come up with better, faster, more targeted answers, more context aware answers, and really look at that. So I see that really kind of starting to drive some of the new business use cases and where companies are going to be able to go with this and do it quickly and easily and have much lower upfront costs and a higher return on investment in the technology stack.
Yeah, absolutely. And even in the Vinted example, I think that's a really good use case for real-time availability as well because, you want to find things that are in stock. You want to make sure that the information is up to date. And your example with SAP and Perplexity, I mean, going beyond SAP, really you need all those data points, all that context to really improve the accuracy and the context awareness of those answers. Now, these are some bigger companies. What about how would this apply to companies that may have smaller projects?
So that's a really neat thing about Vespa. If I've got a small project, I can put a smaller database in there, but I'm still getting that fast, real time, contextual driven information being brought in. And then that database scales and it scales to global scale like Perplexity and Vinted, where I've got billions of things I want to be able to search. And I'm able to do that rapidly and quickly. So I could start off with a small project and be able to scale it up global scale, which is really nice. Or if I want to start and do kind of a proof of concept internally with a small data set for a large company, I could do that and then scale it up and scale it out and really make that work and maybe able to make that effective. So as I'm looking at that in terms of those best practices for building out architecture and implementing it, that's really what I want to be able to do. In fact, as we state in the brief, really look for a high impact proof of concept that you can build out. Start with that, show those quick wins. And again, as you're building that out from the CXO perspective, right? I'm a CTO, I'm looking at, okay, I've got to go back and show, hey, we picked the right technology, we're doing the right things with it, and we're showing quick wins and we're showing value both to our CEO and our board of directors who are funding and making sure that we're kind of picking the right horse with the right speed, with the right doing the right things. And I grew up on a ranch in Colorado, so I'm looking at I don't necessarily need a Morgan, one of those big giant horses that pull wagons. I need maybe a quarter horse, something fast, nimble, can cut corners and go chase cattle. You do something like that, and you want to be able to have kind of the right tool for the right business use case.
I want to switch gears a little bit, talking more about kind of the decision making process. One of the things that you highlight is how the delays in modernization can lead to the continuing rise of technical debt, falling behind competitors. I mean, this is a conversation that has been happening for a while, but what's your take on how executives should weigh this urgency now?
Sure. So first thing is kind of frame that decision, which is the executives need to take this as not just a simple cost decision, but as a strategic decision. And it's about competitive analysis and taking a look at what your competitor is doing and where the market in general is going and where the technology is moving. So that urgency is driven by that competitive pressure and the rising risks of falling behind, especially with AI. And now AI is driving everything. It's in all the software. It's starting to become in the UIs. It's starting to not just be these cute little chatbots, but we're really looking at AI driven technology that's driving information. So if you stick with the legacy systems, that's going to create a real operational risk because it's going to put you at behind trying to keep taking this legacy technology from 20 years ago and trying to use that for driving your AI driven technology that's kind of going on right now. And it's trace kind of changing that dynamic. Also take a look at kind of some of the competitive deficits. So we've been advocating in the brief about taking a look at technical debt and versus kind of where this is. And technical debt used to be all internal. Am I using the right technology? Am I going fast enough? Did I make the right? Everything has technical debt. As soon as you write code, it's got technical debt, and you're always maintaining that trade off for speed and ease of use and what your team knows versus where everything is going. And so you're shifting that from kind of an internal technical debt to an external technical debt. These are what my competitors are using. This is where that market is going. And with those AI native competitors, that's really now becoming your competitive deficit, not just a technical debt. So that inaction then changes to a pretty big urgency. Your competitors are moving faster than you are. They're using the right technology that's really then speeding up their business. Their customers are getting better user experience because they're getting better data, they're getting it faster, and that AI is going much more quickly than Lucene, Solar, Elasticsearch, any of those older technologies can really give you to be able to produce on top of that. So you're really looking at identifying that risk and that urgency. That risk is we're falling behind, and that urgency says Here's what my competitors are doing. Here's where the market is going. Here's where the consumers are going. And it's really keeping then your consumers happy inside of that to make sure that they're looking at getting kind of the right experience. And right now, you've got a lot of competitors in the market. So if you have an older technology that's slower, it's much more expensive, and doesn't give as good of a user experience, your customers are going to go elsewhere and your revenue is going to decrease. So this is really kind of some of the framing points that we're giving the executives in terms of that urgency and that risk.
And I like how you said to take it from a strategic approach because it can be very easy to follow along with the hype and there's this new vector database, there's this new model and going from like looking at it as do we have these features to zooming out and really looking at what it is you're trying to achieve and how these solutions are all working together to achieve that because I think that's where you can start to see that maybe you're not innovating as quickly because the development process is taking longer because you're stitching together these different tools and technologies that don't actually work together.
Right. Yeah. So with any new technology, the first thing that you're going to have to do is make sure that your team is trained on the technology, how to use it, and bring that in. Then also with some of that existential risk that we've said, okay, this is coming because this is now the thing. The other night, really thing that I really like about Vespa is I can use different models. And as we're seeing just this ridiculous model progression, every week we're seeing something new out of Anthropic, we're seeing stuff out of OpenAI, we're seeing stuff out of Google. Which model do I use? Also, when I'm doing vector embedding, as I take that, and this is kind of a really cool technology as well, when we work with an AI, they don't really understand words. They do understand numbers really, really well. So what I do is I embed my data. I give it a number and I turn the words into numbers and I give it kind of a dictionary and I take it and I compile it. I can also then use my vector embeddings on my data using Vespa and choose the model and the process that I use to embed those things. So it fits best with my business use case and then trains that. That's a whole new different paradigm from going back to the old search engines and indexing and putting in the right words and making sure that the search is right. And now I'm looking at I'm really tweaking and tuning my technology to be able to really kind of fit some of my business needs and be able to go faster. This is a whole new training set for both your engineers and your technologists that are really looking at building this out, but it's also future facing. And you're doing this in such a way so that you don't get left behind. You make sure that you're forward facing in the market to make sure that you're indexing your vector embeddings are really then doing kind of the right things to really make sure that your business is as efficient and as effective as you can make it, and that contextually your data is well understood by both your database and your model.
Yeah, exactly. Now, looking ahead, based on your research, where do you see the data serving and AI infrastructure market heading over the next 2 to 3 years? Do you think we'll see broader industry shifts away from Lucene-based engines?
Absolutely. So as we're doing more AI search, because what we're finding is that context search is now what consumers are starting to expect. So we're going to start to see more movement towards Vespa or other databases like it because traditional search isn't keeping up. And it was great when we did it before, but now it's no longer as effective or as efficient. And it's also proven to be much more cost effective. Because now instead of building out my Elk stack with Elasticsearch and Kibana and components or doing deep catalog searches like in Lucene and Solar, now I've got better search engines that are giving me more targeted results and are much more efficient. And again, we've seen some of the case studies that talk about a decrease in the number of servers that they need, right? Again, calling back to Perplexity and calling back to our friends over at Vinted, they were able to kind of decrease that. So now as an executive, I'm looking at, oh, I've got better cost benefit and better return on my investment, and which is always going to be kind of a key driver for an executive. They're looking at how do I maximize my spend to get the right things? And then how do I give better customer service? But what are you really asking for when you say you want AI? Well, I want AI like everybody else. What does that mean? Well, what they're really saying is, okay, if we're using AI like our competitors are we using it the right way? Are we using the right technology to really make it much more effective and speed to market? And how can we do this? This is also key because now I don't just get better customer experience, I'm getting better engineer experience. I'm getting better across my entire stack and across my technology, both external and internal. And I can really start to look at, okay, now I can start to see where the pain points are. I can see how we serve information better and really serve everybody better all the way up and down my organization. So I see this as really the beginning of kind of a renaissance in search, the technologies that we've been able to use. And this is really kind of where it's going to be going in the next few years. Again, this is kind of groundbreaking technology. And we know Yahoo and Spotify and some of these other really big companies have been using it to give better experience. And they're using it internally as well on a lot of their platforms. So I see this as, yeah, this is kind of a mind shift in terms of where do we want to go and how do we want to get there.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting. And as we start to wrap up, just some of my key takeaways from this discussion, as we talk about search, it still continues to be, the foundation for a lot of these, AI applications and the interaction mechanisms between companies and consumers. And, search itself isn't going away, but the way in which we are using search, the way that we're going from matching to being more context aware, the fact that there are all of these AI advancements with these new machine learning models and ways that we can interact with data needs to be context aware. It needs to be more adaptable. It needs to really kind of move with the needs of the market rather than kind of being this stagnant, system that, maybe we've been used to for the last 20 years. So what key messages would you hope executive readers take away from this discussion and this report that you did?
Sure. So the kind of key takeaways are take a look at framing this in a different way. This is critical because it's a new architectural paradigm, and that paradigm is faster, better search, better response times, better answers. But you're not just getting semantic search, which was great. You're just getting keywords. Now you're looking at context aware search. And then you also want to start investing in expertise. With every technology change, you're going to need to upskill your team. And we've heard the AI apocalypse for the last few months. It's going to replace everybody's jobs. No, this is going to make your team better, faster, stronger, but you have to give them the right skills and the right skill sets. So if your team knew Lucene and they knew all the Java code behind that, okay, great. Let's teach them now what the upskilling is for Vespa. And Vespa's got some great partner programs where you teach them how to use it and bringing and getting over that learning curve and try to decrease the size of that learning curve is also key. So companies like Vespa invest a lot in that research and technology and how do we train our users on how to use the database. So you need a budget, plan for that, and then try to decrease that learning curve as much as you can so that your team feels comfortable using it and they're going to be in it for the long haul. So again, that 20 years of experience in solar, great, because you understand our data, our catalogs, how our users are using it. Those are the people that you should be upskilling and then helping to come up with the next route. You don't want to get rid of people. You want to give them then the next technology that they're going to be using and keep your smart, well-trained, well understood, keep that business knowledge, which is, again, always as a CTO, you're looking at how do I either institutionalize that knowledge, whether it's in something and it just doesn't live in one or two people's heads. I want to try to keep it across my organization. So now, if I do have attrition, I know how to bring them up to speed. I know how to teach them my information and the catalogs. And then secondly, we also want to kind of invest in the technology in and around Vespa. I want to start to think about how do I bring that technology into my organization and how do I use that across my stack? And so we talked about having it customer facing, but we also talked about having it internal facing. So if I've got engineers that are looking at some of my observability, they were using some log search pieces and with Elasticsearch, how do I start to bring that in and say, okay, we've already invested in Vespa. We've already got it customer facing and we've made some great improvements on our homepages and our recommendation engines, and it's doing some really amazing things. How do I do the same thing now with my internal stack? And so I want to bring that in and start and bring this through as, okay, now we want to be AI native, but what does that mean? So again, it's upskilling my team, teaching them the paradigm shift from just using technology as a tool to now I'm using technology as my partner. That's a whole different paradigm shift. We've always been hearing about these 10x engineers. Well, now with AI, I can really have 10x engineers because now they're doing 10 times more and they're much more efficient because they're using AI and they're using Vespa and whatever model I'm using to really be able to understand my business and how it works. So again, it's that mind shift from I've got some smart people that understand my stack to I've got some smart people with some really smart tools to be able to use smart tools in my vector databases and Vespa to be able to kind of bring it all together, really then accelerating our growth, really accelerating our technology and decreasing a lot of the operational costs that I've got, both in terms of numbers of servers, because again, with Vespa, I can have a smaller footprint. And with Vespa, I'm also decreasing my engineering load. These engineers are able to do more with less and then have an AI partner helping them understand, hey, here's my data internally. Here's how I understand it. Here's how I use it, and really start to become forward facing with the technology, leveraging it, kind of really be able to move things much more rapidly than we've been able to do in the past.
Yeah, those are great takeaways and best practices for people to follow. So I guess, as we close, if people want access to this report, how can they get this?
Sure. So go to gigaom.com. Our reports are both up there. We did the Sonar report on vector databases, where we positioned Vespa as one of the leaders there. And then you can also search for the CXO Decision Brief, and you're able to find that and read through it. And then I also want to go back and point out that on Vespa .com, you can go out and find all of the case studies that we reference. And we didn't reference them in the report, but I did heavily use them in some of how we want to think about this. I also did mention some of the Perplexity numbers because I think that's a good call out, because if Perplexity is using this, I think that's one of the most stellar use cases. And then I found out Spotify's using it and Vinted is using it. So some of these use cases are really great decision makers for augmenting the brief. And then now you can take the case studies that are over on Vespa and say, yep, here's some really great technology, and here's some of the actual companies that are using it and using it effectively.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Wei. This is another great discussion. Love
Thanks,
talking
Bonnie.
about this with you and appreciate you taking the time today.
Bonnie, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.